Hi, I'm Maggie,
Hi, I'm Grace, and this is
a very bookish podcast.
Hey guys, welcome back to a Very Bookish podcast. Today is episode 80. And of course, I'm always doing a solo episode now, but I have a special author guest. I have Layla Reyne with me today. Hello, Layla. How are you?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
I'm amazing. It's actually kind of late. I've been having a full day of classes and work, and now I like ran from campus to get to here, and I have to go back to campus. So it's a busy day. But how are you?
It's a Monday.
Yeah, it is Monday. It's a Monday, and I'm just like, I'm powering through. I was on a work trip all last week, got food poisoning, and then
Oh, me too. I got it over the weekend. It's going around.
Yeah, no, I had like Italian food and I got food poisoning from Italian food. And I was like, I am never going to eat rigatoni vodka again. Just never again will I eat pasta. I had pasta today. Just, I can't look at rigatoni vodka ever again.
No, I haven't. There are certain ones like that for me. Like this weekend, probably because I can't pinpoint which one it was necessarily, but I definitely have foods where it's like, no, we're not going to touch. I mean, generally I only have one no food, but there are certain ones that have bad memories attached to them too.
Yeah, especially with alcohol too. I definitely have some bad memories, and I'm like,
oh no.
I see it on the shelf, and I'm
That's
like,
me and That's me and Merlot, and this was before Sideways, so it's not a takeoff. But like, yeah, no, 20th birthday. That was good. That was bad.
Yeah, Fireball used to be like my favorite thing, and now I'm like, I look at that, and I'm like, I'm gonna vomit looking at that right now. But yeah, I think it's kind of funny that I literally didn't bring up alcohol, but you have book series that are like after alcohol, so single malt
Castor. So the whole first series was Agents, Irish, and Whiskey. And those are the whiskey titles, and then Trouble Brewing, which is the beer titles. And yes, the wine things will come eventually. Like the irony of it all is that I know way more about wine than I do about liquors or beers. Like I know a lot about whiskey too. But yeah, I know the most about wine, and I still haven't done those titles yet. Eventually, I'll get there.
You got to start it off, and then that's when you like shoot it up. Is when you start with wine, and you're like, well, this is what I'm going to put everything into this. So for our listeners who are listening, would you be able to give a little background on who you are, how you got into publishing, and maybe how like you wrote your first book?
Yeah. So, I mean, typical writer story that I've written as long as I can remember. But I think I really started writing. So I got into it by fan fiction. And so like X-Files fan fiction back in the day. And wrote Mulder Scully, read Mulder Krychek, dabbled a little there. And then, I went to law school, and that kind of killed all creativity for about 10 years. Law school and big firm practice, and but then like I came back to it again through fan fiction, Vampire Diaries that time actually, and so and then I had a Vampire Diaries a fanfic friend who was like, "Hey, you might like Kristen Ashley," and I was kind of done, and I realized I'd been writing romance all along. Like I had never read, I think I had like stolen my grandmother's Danielle Steele book at some point, but like my mom didn't have romance books around or anything. So like this is how I had come to it. I'm a TV person first, and then a book person generally, and so I always gravitated toward those stories in TV, like Mulder and Scully. Any of the things where it took them forever to get together. That was my favorite thing. Like I'm all about the slow burn. And then like I found romance, and it was like, oh, here we go.
That's when you sold your soul, is romance. Is that when you sold your soul?
Yeah, I was like, oh wait, there's all these books in this Kristen Ashley universe. Let's go. And then I think I got into Let Me Sing after that. And that whole Side Changeling series, which is massive. Even by then it was so long. And so I had some good reading material for a while, and it also came to the point with fan fiction that I was like, okay, I'd rather write within my own world and not necessarily the canon of someone else's. And so I started, I think it was 2013, I did Nano, 2014, NaNoWriMo, which is coming up, which is great for anyone who's is thinking about writing. It's a great way to get motivated. And wrote a manuscript. That one got me my agent. It was not the first one that sold. It's actually what 5 years later became What We May Be, which I released last year, indie. Mm-hmm. And then, but I did, while that one was being shopped, I wrote Single Malt, and that sold, and that was kind of where things went from there. And so I've been publishing 5 years hybrid. So I have stuff with traditional publishing, and I have stuff that's indie as well. So, and yeah, I mean, and I'm not a full-time author. I still work. So it's part-time for me, but I love it. And, it's been great. It's a great creative outlet. And just to tell these stories, and it's like, there's no shortage. It's just not enough time to write everything that I want to.
Yeah. I mean, I have talked to a lot of authors recently. I think my last maybe 2 guests, they have been like, oh yeah, I wrote fan fiction and that's how I got into writing. And I'm like,
oh yeah,
the amount of fan fiction that I wrote as a child, like the pipeline from fan fiction to publishing as an author is a direct pipeline, because fan fiction, there's also like on Wattpad people who do publish their full books, and it's like amazing. And they're like, yeah, I used to write fan fiction, but now you can see that I'm writing my own story. And it is kind of like what you said, a big creative outlet of not being restrained to somebody else's work. And I admire authors who can persevere through that, because I'm like, I am too scared to write my own stuff. And I'm in grad school right now. I'm so busy. I'm getting my master's. Yeah. And then I'm moving. Like, I really don't have time right now.
There's a lot.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think with fanfic too, like what's great is, I mean, the community, like you already learn how to work with beta readers. Like I had betas. You do get the instant feedback, which is great. So you're kind of getting used to that. You're also getting used to reviews. I'm like, when I started publishing, reviews aren't going to faze me that much because I was used to it with fan fiction. But like, it was great. And like, at least for me, it was a bit of an evolution of that. I was writing in canon, right? Meaning in their stories, and Damon and Elena are still vampires, right? And then I started writing the AU stuff where it's just those characters, but like they're not vampires, they're real people in real life. And it's like, okay, I can just take this out, right? I don't need that framework necessarily. I would rather have her living in Southport instead of in whatever that town was in Virginia where that story was set.
Mystic Falls.
It was actually filmed in Georgia. Mystic Falls, that's what it was.
Yeah, I always thought that was so weird that it's filmed in Georgia, but you're trying to be in Virginia. I'm like, why don't you just make it in Georgia?
But so I mean, like, direct pipeline for sure. There's a lot of us who I think came through that way, and I mean, you learn good habits, you learn bad habits, and you just continue to refine the process, and that's a great way to start the process. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah,
and to keep going. Like I know a lot of authors who still do it on the side because it's like this is all very seriously, but sometimes I just need to go do the wackadoodle thing over here, and that's the creative expression too, right? So you just roll with it.
Yeah, I noticed Katie Roberts. She does that where she has a Patreon and she does like short stories, and we talked with her about that, of how that's how she gets kind of like her creative outlet out, is having, at least when you work on these like giant books for so long, you're like, I just need to write like 100-page short story just to, make me feel special again. And so I totally understand that. And do you think that because I've also, the last, I think 3 authors I've talked to all have also been corporate working women who have Sorry.
That's okay.
He's about to go crazy. He has the crazy.
He's hunting. This is funny. Okay.
But so what was I saying? Oh, so living like you are a corporate girl boss, and so you said that writing is your creative outlet. So how do you put aside that time to write? Do you have like a schedule of like, I write on these days, or do you write like an hour or two after work, or what is kind of your way of making sure that you're able to have that outlet?
I'm not as structured as I probably should be. And it's changing with my age, right? I think when I was younger, when I was first starting out writing, I was definitely a night writer. And so I would write after work. But things have changed a little bit with my work and who I work for. And I'm also on the East Coast now. So people are actually up. And so it's shifting a little bit. I'm trying to get into the morning writing habit just because that's working better for me these days than staying up till midnight. But a lot of what happens is the weekend of having that time, and it's just grabbing time here and there. I'm a little gentler on myself about how much I want to release in a year at this point. I don't have to, it's not my full-time job. And so, I think scaling back a little bit to make it more reasonable makes getting those 500 or 1,000 words out that I need a whole lot easier as well. There's a little bit less pressure there. And just getting the right environment. Like we just moved into a new house and I have a nice office. And so like, it's nice to come in here and actually put down some words. So, just trying to carve that out, but it's got to work around everything else.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like the authors who are full-time authors, like amazing. I don't think I could ever be a full-time author because I feel like I would he looks like a squirrel sitting right behind me. Yeah. Hi. But yeah, I always find like women who write and have like jobs outside of writing too. I'm always like, you are so strong. You are so strong for being able to handle writing and then having also another job. Cause I don't know. I have ADHD.
Writing's a full-time gig.
Yeah.
I mean,
I have ADHD. I don't think I could handle that much stuff. I already can't handle the workload I have.
I mean, it's a juggle. I find I'm the person who does better when I have a lot on my plate. So I like it. I think a lot of it too, but when full-time authors struggle to do it all. Like there's just so much to do. Whether you're trad, indie, or hybrid, like there's so much to do. So it sort of becomes prioritizing too, right? It also becomes finding the right support staff. Right. That is one of the nice things about having a full-time job is that I can hire a PA. I can hire a publicist. And those things that helps tremendously take time so that I can write because someone else is handling that part of it. And so it's a little like project managing, right? So you kind of have to have that skill set. But doing that has helped a lot for me. And also just realizing, actually looking at it strategically and for you as the author of what moves the needle and doesn't, and stop doing the things that don't. Just stop, right? I mean, I know when you're first starting out as an author, you want to do everything and be everywhere and go to this and do that. But like, not everything's going to move the needle when time is compressed already. Words have to come first, right? And then the rest of it within the bucket of time that you have. And so prioritize and do the things that one, you enjoy, and two, that move the needle. So
I also have noticed that a lot of authors are doing, like more authors are doing that traditionally published and also indie publishing. So how do you kind of decide between what is going to be indie published and what is going to be like traditionally published? Is it like the content of the book publishers just aren't going to want to publish that kind of content? Or what kind of is your strategy for picking, and if you get to pick, I guess?
I mean, I think it kind of depends on your career goals a lot. I'm just publishing indie right now. I have a couple projects in the back of my head that, lean more kind of toward, I guess, what you would call upmarket women's fiction. And that's the kind of stuff that I would eventually probably pitch to a publisher. Just because, and part of that's because I don't know that market as well. And so like, I would not mind having, the help of a publisher. I mean, granted, we still do a ton of the marketing aspect of it, but, you want to be in the best position for your book. But it also has to work for your schedule. For me, ultimately, what drove me into indie was that given my day job, I needed to be able to set my schedule. I needed to be able to schedule when I released, when I wrote, and I needed way more flexibility than what having a publisher, because they have to plan. A publisher has to plan when they're going to publish stuff. They have to know when they're going to get the manuscript, and everything is like locked in 9 months in advance, at least, right? And so for me, that became the push for going indie. Largely was that I just needed the flexibility, right? But indie like comes with, you got to do your own cover, you got to do your own editing, you have to set up all this. So again, you have to do the project management thing. So, personality, your time, your career goals, all of that has to go into the decision of, and what is the content to some extent? Because like, if you're publishing YA, there is indie YA, but that is largely a publisher game, right? And so, right, like you just kind of have to look at the whole picture and decide what's best for that book and for you. So
I feel like that's a very strategic insight. I always feel like people are like, oh, just go with whatever you feel. I love that you were like nitty gritty, like you got to think how the book is going to sell is basically what
that's an insight. 8 years into this, right? In retrospect and like looking at everything, like those are all the things you have to balance.
So for your first series, Agents, Irish, and Whiskey, how did you come up first with the concept, the titles, and the covers? They're beautiful. I love them. I'm like, oh, these are like neon, but not neon. And then the guys on the covers, and I'm like, also single malt, the cover, I'm like, oh, okay.
So credit to my publisher. That's Karina Harlequin who did those covers for that one. And I remember the day, because that's my first book. And you're like, oh God, please. Like I'm looking at the emails in my box and I'm like, is this gonna look good or not? Right. And I opened it and squealed. Right. Because it looked, I'm a movie person, and it looked like it looked like the poster to Heat, kind of like it, which is one of my favorites. And it was just like, oh, that's great. Right.
Reality really struck you.
Yeah. I'm like, this is awesome. And like, I had that same experience when I opened the cover for Prince of Killers, which was the first one I went full indie with. And Kate Ashwood did that cover for me. And I happy danced around the room. I was like, oh my God. Right. So that's great when those happen. But back to your question about Agents, Irish, and Whiskey. I grew up on action movies. That's my thing. So I knew I was in the romantic suspense. Like I'd read enough at this point. I was like, that's where I'm going. Right. I do a little bit of the other, but romantic suspense is the bread and butter. And, I just, you hear things or you see things, and I am around enough hackers. It was, I lived in Silicon Valley at the time. So it was like, okay, those words are all around my head. Right. I'm not, but I know people. And so I was like, okay, I can do this. I'm also from North Carolina. So that was, Jamie's basketball background, kind of knowing a fair bit about that. And, just putting those pieces together and, going with the story. And I always, like in my reading, I liked trilogies. I liked same couple series. I want to sit with a couple for a while. and get to know them and see them grow over time. I mean, like, don't get me wrong, I like standalone books, but like, I really like, things. I love the trend now where we're seeing more second arcs, third arcs of the same couple. I'm like, yes, give it to me. I want more of that. Because I grew up, again, TV. I went 9 seasons waiting for Mulder and Scully to get together. And then it was kind of like cratered, but bitter still. But like, that's the kind of like, I want that kind of connection and time with the characters. And so I kind of went in knowing that that's what I wanted to do. So, and then have subsequently done a lot of trilogies in that vein.
So you have a new series releasing. Dead Draws, the next one to come out, or that's the first one?
No, that's the first one. Bad Bishop just came out, which is the second
Bad
one in that
Bishop,
trilogy.
which the covers.
That's Bad Bishop, and that's Dead Draw. That's the one. I know, like Wander takes some gorgeous photos, and Kate she knows, like, don't futz with it. Just put some pretty typography on it and let's go.
Yeah, your covers. I'm a horny woman. Okay. I like the raunchy covers of half naked people on the covers. Like, I don't do discreet covers. I do like the raunchiest covers I can get, like bodice rippers. Sign me up. Like, okay, enough of me like complimenting the covers. Do you want to kind of explain to our listeners what this series is about and how you created these characters?
Yeah. So I'll start with, this is Marsh. He's Agent Emma Marshall. He appears in Silent Night, which is the last book of the Fog City series. He is one of the characters, army buddies, becomes his best friend. And I kind of had a little thought at that point. I was like, oh, this asshole's going to want a character. He's going to want his book, right? I know he's going to want a whole series. I thought it was going to be one book. And then he showed up in What We May Be, which, speaking of covers, that's like my all-time favorite of mine. Like, Kate I was in a restaurant when that cover came through, and like, I caused a little bit of a scene, but
that's how you know. That's how you know it's good. If you don't cause a scene, that's how you know
it's good.
Like, what's the point?
Yeah. But so he wandered his way into that story. And I was like, okay, well, I guess he's definitely getting a story now. And that's the point where I realized what his conflict was, and that was that he kept falling for emotionally unavailable men. Because like, he kind of fallen in love with, he kind of had feelings for his 2 best friends, but they were already in love with other people. And then he wanted his father's approval and could never get it. And like, this was his struggle. And then, so, what's the foil to that? It's interesting. So usually plot comes first to me. The romance came first on this one. I knew the characters and the romance right off the bat. And so his love interest, who is this cover, is also FBI agent Levi Bishop. He is a widowed single father, and they enter into a marriage of convenience because Levi's got some, left his wife passed away from cancer. So there's like medical bills and the cost of living in California. He's got a teenage son, and Marsh has this inheritance that he does not really want. And he's like, but Levi he's been also thrown off the case that he still wants to be on. And Levi's his connection to that case. And so that's how they kind of come together. And then it's the case involves like international crime, transnational organized crime, trafficking, trafficking of all things, people, arms, etc. Which I had a little bit of background from college studying that, and so it was like good to kind of pull all that in. And I'd meant for a long time to kind of get that into the books, and I was really happy to be able to do so. And I love these characters because they're older. Levi's 38, Marshall's 45. That is one thing I have loved recently, is writing more mature characters. They use their words. They talk. There's not a whole lot of time to bullshit.
Yeah.
They're past that point in their lives. And so they approach things like grown-ups. And I've loved writing them. Like they use their words. And they're great partners both at the job and in their lives. And of course, the marriage of convenience, they actually fall in love. And so, but they're still chasing the bad guys. So.
I mean, I also grew up watching like action movies and stuff. And so when I saw like almost all of your books were about like romantic suspenseful romance. I don't know the name for it, but I was like, oh, James Bond, Bones, the TV show Bones was like my childhood growing up. Agent Booth. Agent Booth was my favorite goddamn character.
He's always Angel to me.
I watched I didn't like him as Angel, but I loved him as Booth because I just didn't like Angel. I was a Buffy girl. I was like, no, I want Buffy. No. I want Buffy to myself. That's what I want.
Yeah.
And then I saw him as Booth, and I was like, that's what I want.
That's it. Yeah.
But
I watched that show too.
Yeah, it's all of those like Hawaii Five-0, like all of those like NCIS, Criminal Minds. That TV show is so good. I love that. Penelope is amazing on that. She's like my favorite character.
There used to be a show older called Profiler. That's the one I really liked. And so like that's kind of a pre-runner of Criminal Minds. But yeah, no, I mean, same. Grew up on all that stuff, and so like it was just kind of natural that that's where it was going to go in the books.
I mean, I always feel like within kind of, you talked about it earlier, I was always watching those and I was always looking for the romance. And I noticed like growing up, I was always looking for those romantic connections. And I was like, oh, I like this romance plot. I like this romance plot. And then I finally started reading J.R. Ward. And I was like, oh, I can read this stuff. Like just, oh my gosh, J.R. Ward. I was like thrown into the trenches with romance when I started with J.R. Ward. And the Black Dagger Brotherhood series is like
for sure.
First book series that I like, romance that I like really, really read. I still have not finished that series. It has been almost 2 years. Still have not finished that series.
That's a lot of folks' gateway drug into romance.
Oh my gosh.
That's a lot of people I hear from.
Even though they're like the mass market paperback and they're like 600 pages, I would eat that stuff up so fast. Like I'm like you can't, like I will crease the spine. I will crease the spine to read this book. And I don't like creasing spines. But all my J.R. Ward books, you just see like wrinkles in the spines. And I'm like, it's because I reread them. There are some scenes there that I enjoy reading about, and I need to reread. That's what I like to tell people. So yeah. Cool. I mean, so when you've written quite a couple series and books. How do you decide like I want to write this series or I want to write a book? Like with the concept and the idea of it, is it something that like you've like processing and developing, like you'll think about it for a really long time, or do you have like a spark like, oh, I want to write a book about this, and then you jot something down and then come back to it later? Or like is it more naturally like progressing and then you're like, okay, I'm ready to write? Or is it like instantaneous like spark?
It's usually that the spark will happen. I'll write the note down and I'll come back to it just because of time. Like it's rare that I will have the time to just sit down and write something. Now that happened last year. Was it last year or the year before? I can't remember. I'm working on something and I only got to do half it before I had to stop. But that was a case where I was like, no, I have to write this like now. And part of that was because I was burned out and I needed to do something totally different. And it didn't end up totally different. Like I was going to put it on a different pen name and then someone read it and was like, no, that's a Layla book. It's still a Layla book. And so, but usually, like I said with Marsh, right? Like as I was continuing to process through like Fog City And then What We May Be, I was writing down the notes for his story and like the parts of it as it came. Like I knew what his conflict was. Like there's a character that shows up in Bad Bishop who's going to get a story. I've written, typically I'll get the character, the title. Like if I know the title, it goes on the to-do list, right? So that's kind of my, okay, fine, you got a title. So, and like I've written his first lines of his book. A lot of times it'll be the first scene. I will write the first scene and then I will go back to what I need to do, but then come back to it. I use Scrivener. So sometimes if it's really like, for his story, I went ahead and did the cards because I knew exactly what it was. So I was like, here we go. Now I won't write it till next year probably, but like it's there. And I think it's good to let it germinate. Like even with this, like I don't anticipate probably like really diving into book 3 until January, just because I want it to marinate. Like it's a book 3, I know where it all has to go, but I still want to let a little bit of the stuff marinate. And there are a couple of other things that I just want to finish. And this will be the first time in 15 years that we're home for the holidays. And so I guess I want to spend some time with my family.
Yeah. You want a break. You deserve a break. Like the last 2 years have been stressful. Authors have been pushing out like the amount of like, I think you were talking about how you like being able to publish on your own schedule and stuff. Like the amount of like authors publishing every 6 months, like they are pushing books. And I'm like, slow down. Slow down. I'm like, I can't read that fast.
If you're in KU and particularly in romance, it's like every 2 to 3 months that you need to be pushing to like at least at the front end to like actually get kind of rolling. So that for me that wasn't feasible, and that was part of the reason I went out of KU and went back wide, because I was like, I just no, that doesn't work for my life and my schedule. Right?
Yeah. So. You just, I mean, I feel like every author finds eventually their way of how they like to do things. And that's kind of the thing I like enjoying hearing is when I talk to authors, they're like, oh, I don't usually do this. And it's always a new, different way each time. They're like, yeah, I just write. Or like Katie Roberts, she's just like, I just sit and write for like 3 straight weeks. And then I get a book done. And I'm like, how? She's like crazy. Katie Robert is my current obsession right now. That's why I keep mentioning her. She's awesome. I just got The Dragon's Bride, and I've been reading a lot more like I'm a dark romance reader. So I love darker romance. Like I have a ton of contemporary that I read, but like I'm in my dark romance phase. As you can see, it says the Dark Romance Readers Club from our merch shop. But so Katie Robert, that's why I keep mentioning her throughout this whole episode. It's because I'm obsessed with her right now, and I want her to be my mother. Like she's just so sweet, such a nice person, and I'm just like, can you please adopt me? I'm all alone in Omaha. So that's why I talk about her so much. So sorry for that. But final question for you is, since we kind of talked about like you writing, and that's what I really like to hear about from authors is their writing process and how they got started. Could you give one piece of advice to a person who does want to start writing, and what would your piece of advice be for them to start, or like maybe push from what they're writing now to writing other books?
Oh, you want me to give only one?
Okay, you can give multiple. You can give multiple.
One, realize it's a long game, right? The number of people who hit it big right off the bat is very small. Like I would say, again, I started writing the first book in 2013, was published in 2017. I am 25 books in, and I feel like I finally get it, right? Within the past year, right? I found what works for me, what is working for the first time, like really working, like schedule wise, production wise, finance wise. And so like it is a long game. Do not expect that it's an overnight success. That is the rare case. And I see a lot of folks get discouraged when it doesn't happen like that. And it's not the ball game for most people. It's not the ball game in life for most people. Right. And so, I mean, I think that's my one big takeaway, but really read in your genre, and figure out what you want to do in it. You know, if you can write fast, that's great. And you want to write to market and you like the trends, that's great. If you've got some flexibility and you want to take some chances, then go for it. Right. So like, but you still need to kind of know what's going on in the genre. Like I read as much as, if not more than I write. And I don't necessarily write exactly to genre either, but I still read a ton of it. But yeah, I mean, I really think the long game is the thing to understand the most. So,
Wow. Well,
and to accept and
yeah,
be ready for.
Be ready for it to be a long journey is what I'm hearing you say. Is you got to grab a pack of snacks and some water and get going on the road. It's going to be like a couple marathons. Have a flask in your shoe for a little bit. And mile 4 is you'll probably need it. Well, thank you to Layla, and thank you to everybody who has been listening to this episode. Make sure you go check out Bad Bishop and all of her other series. I will have them linked down below in the description. I'll have all her social media links so you can go check her out, because she is quite the character. And so I definitely would recommend, because romance I'm trying to get into. And so I'm excited. I've been reading manga.
And I've got FF and MMF, and you'll see more like queer MF also coming. So like it's all LGBTQ romance probably.
Yes. Yes, which we love. As a bisexual woman, I like both sides. I need to see both sides represented. So thank you, Layla, for coming on today. I had such an amazing time. And thank you to our listeners for continuing to support us. And thank you for everybody who has bought from A Very Bookish shop. And our our University of Smutsville collection has gone amazing thanks to you. So thank you, everybody. And I will see you guys next week. Bye.